So my grandfather and grandmother, their families at least, and my grandfather for certain, came from a small town in Russia called Neue Messer. Neue means new, Messer means knife. They had come from a German community at the bequest of Catherine the Great. I don't know, it was 1700s. I'm not sure of the date. Catherine the Great was German, and she went over and married the Tsar of Russia, and he was something wrong with him, and he died, and she became the Tsarina of Russia. She ran the country, and so there were areas in Russia which were poorly farmed, and so she invited a German community called Messer, a little village. She invited the entire village to go to this area in Russia and promised them land and no conscription for 100 years. Now they would come along in various parts of Germany and Russia, and they would go into a little town and take all the young men and put them in the army, conscript them into the army, and they'd go off and get killed or become different people. So they promised him no conscription for 100 years and free land. Each guy got 150 acres of land or something like that. And I don't know what the details were on that. So they went from Messer, which they eventually called Alta Messer, Old Messer, and they called this new area Neue Messer, or New Messer, New Knife. And they had the community, and Grandpa was born there. And anyway, at some point, the 100 years ran out. And so the story goes, they came along and the Russians and said, we're going to have a community military, what's the word I'm looking for? Militia, to protect the town.
Yeah.
And so every man in this town from the ages of 18 to 60 or 5 or something will be part of the militia. So come down this weekend on Saturday or Sunday and bring your weapons, and we're going to form you up and make a militia and to protect the town. Well, that sounded pretty good. The town needed to do that. So everybody showed up, and they brought their weapons. They formed them up into military groups, and then they said, we've got a problem here. We can't furnish you with ammunition. Every person here has got a different weapon. He's got a shotgun, he's got a pistol, he's got a rifle, he's got a shotgun of a different caliber. We can't furnish everybody with ammunition, so we're going to issue everyone a uniform rifle. See this uniform rifle? Everybody gets, well, that was a pretty nice deal. Everybody gets a new weapon, and all the weapons they had were old as the hills, and so they said, turn in your weapon, we'll give you a chit for a new weapon, and they gave him a certificate. This entitles you to a brand new certain caliber gun, and so they turned in their weapons, they got the certificate, and amazingly, those weapons never arrived. A week or two later, they said, well, we've changed our minds, we'll protect you. So then a bunch of men come in on horseback and take over the town. And they've got no guns. They've given up their weapons. Well, Grandpa was born in 1880, I think, something like that, 81, 80. He came to the United States when he was about 16, 1895, 96, came through Ellis Island. As I understand it, he walked from Ellis Island, from New York, to Kansas, where he had relatives and friends, and several members of the family had come. A couple of them got to take the train, but he walked. And he would stop in farms and work and get fed and walk some more. Eventually made it to Kansas. And, I'm sorry I can't give you the details of all this. I never thought to ask him the details of this. It would have made a fascinating story. Married my grandmother, who was a Lorenz, and Clinton thought they had a Jewish background, and eventually got into the grain business. And though he had a third-grade education, he apparently was very bright and very successful. And it was Oklahoma in the early days, and so he had 4 children, and my dad was one of them. And they moved to Enid, Oklahoma, and that's where I was born. So that's the story. And now, Grandpa never knew how to shoot a gun. He couldn't hit the inside of a barn, the broad side of a barn from the inside, But their history of losing their weapons in Neue Messer made an impression on him, and he told his sons, never let them take your guns away. Never. And he gave them, a 15-cent box of 22 shells probably every day or every week or something like that, and they were all expert marksmen. And as a matter of fact, Dad taught me to shoot, and he set up a target in the basement at Enid, Oklahoma. We had a 20, 30-foot target range. And I learned to shoot pretty well. When I got in the Army and went to Vietnam, they sent me first to Okinawa. And I was the doctor, and they came to me one day and said, Doc, you've got to go out and qualify. You're in special forces now. You have to go out and qualify to shoot a weapon. But Doc, you don't have to worry about qualifying. We'll fake it, They didn't say those words, but you don't have to worry. We'll take care of that. You don't have to shoot well. We're not going to spend a lot of time trying to teach you to shoot. And so they took me out and took me to the train fire course. Now, in World War II, they would have a major confrontational battle, and they would go by after the battle was over and look down the barrels of the gun, and about 1 out of every 3 guns would have a barrel that was totally clean. When you shoot a gun, there are little particles of powder that stick to the barrel, and you can tell, and of course they would clean them every couple of days. And they would realize that even though everybody had had an opportunity to shoot the night before, 1 out of every 3 guys, or I don't know what the statistic is, but too many, would never even fire their gun. They'd just bury their head in the sand and so they started not shooting at targets because, it's nighttime and dark and people are appearing in the shadows and popping up, and they don't have a big red target, on them. And so what they did was start a course called train fire, and these silhouettes would pop up and pop down, and they had them at 25 yards, 50 yards, 100 yards, I don't know, 200 yards. I don't know whether, I don't remember the number of yards, but and you would do it standing, walking, prone, sitting, do it, you know, and they would, these, if you hit the target, it would go down, and you could tell that it had been hit, and they would count it. And there was a man who was walking beside you who would count the number that you got. Well, I'd hunted since I was, you know, a really tiny kid, and I came out about number 3 out of 83 guys or 90 guys or something like that. I shot expert marksman. It's the only award I got in the military, and they had not even let me go and sight in my rifle. They just taken me down just to, you have to shoot and we'll fake it, and I shot expert marksman. Well, I'm not sure, but I think the sergeants treated me a little bit better after that, you know, with a little bit more respect, and I attributed to that to Grandpa and teaching his sons to shoot guns. Never let them take your guns. And I think that that's one of the reasons, even though people get killed in the United States, it's one of the reasons that you know, that the laws remain. You can have a gun. And I know that one of my good Jewish friends really likes that story, you know, because they learned their lesson in World War II. You know, they ain't gonna ever go through what they went through in World War II. And as I said, I think that Clinton said we probably had some Jewish heritage. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know. And I have always liked the attitude that the Jews have when their children are 13 years old. They have a thing called a bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, and these kids stand up and they announce, you know, they read a little bit in the foreign language, and they stand up and say, "Today I am a man. Today I am a woman. You know, I'm an adult. I am responsible for what I do and what happens to me." You know, well, for everybody else, it's, oh, well, he's not 18. He just shot 2 or 3 people. He's only 17. He doesn't deserve to be. Well, I kind of have the idea that that's something I want my kids to know when they're 13. I want them to be responsible for what they do.
Or when they're 45.